So I think we ended on a very interesting note for the last plenary and hope to continue on some of the questions which have been raised in that plenary. Uh, I think one of the things which was raised by the earlier plenary and something which is very important to acknowledge is that we seem to now at least recognize and cognize the finiteness of the planet, the need and the challenge for sustainability across all stakeholders, perhaps. Its translation into action is perhaps the key issue. And therefore, we seem to have clearly established it as a collective action problem. And this is where I think this particular session is going to be very important. Okay? A collective action problem typically means that we're trying to see who is responsible. And one consistently sees then that whether the emphasis is on policymakers as the source for talking about actions on sustainability, whether it is going to be the corporates, whether it is going to be larger society at large, and how do we move through this kind of a conundrum, typically. The challenge that this particular session takes on is also something, the context which Dr. Khosla mentioned really, and which is that if there was a stage on the world canvas where governments themselves took the lead for policy making, to a world now where clearly in some ways, I wouldn't say the onus for policy making, but definitely in terms of conceptualization of a whole lot of responsibility has shifted on to the private sector. Okay? And it's a very, very interesting, a very challenging stage at which we are there. So if you look at all international forums, including the currently ongoing COP discussions, or last year we had the UN Habitat Conference, or in 2015 we had the sustainability goals which have been finalized. In all of this, the emphasis on private sector involvement in the actualization of all of these what are called universal goals has become extremely critical. And it is in this context, therefore, that perhaps we should be looking at this session. What kind of education, what kind of challenges are called for the private sector? Even more importantly, what this means is that the private sector is not the only implementer. That's not what is called for. But what one is looking for is really stewardship, bringing on to stage the values which are involved and giving value to sustainability, establishing that. Okay? And how prepared is the private sector for this? I remember that we are talking about the Bombay Stock Exchange, but at the launch of India's independence, on the eve of that, it is the corporates in this city and in this country which had taken the lead to actually formulate the Bombay Plan, which set the stage for the development of India in the next 20, 25 years to come. And I would say that is an example of prime stewardship by the corporate sector. And I think that is what one is looking for, and what we hope for the very interesting and eminent panelists in this session is to perhaps engage with this question of are the corporates prepared for that? What does this kind of preparedness actually mean? Secondly, how can academics contribute to this kind of preparedness? How can policymakers work with corporates in order to fulfill this? So let's look at the potential of this entire idea of how corporates can engage with the idea of sustainability.